Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Zen and the Art of SOLIDWORKS Surfacing, presented by the DiMonte Group. My name is Andrew Lowe. I'm a senior industrial designer. I've been using SOLIDWORKS for almost 15 years now. Do rough surfaces have you on edge? Got a kink in your spline? Zen out and come to really understand how SOLIDWORKS surfacing works. Using advanced techniques, I'll demonstrate surface modeling workflows that allow you to quickly and easily create the most challenging of shapes. Located just outside Chicago, Illinois, the DiMonte Group is a full-service product development consultancy offering industrial design, design engineering, electrical engineering, and software development services. In the next 4 installments of Zen and the Art of SOLIDWORKS Surfacing, we'll be taking a look at a modeling technique I refer to as solid sculpting. We'll start out with a solid body, and then we'll develop surface features that we'll use to shape and sculpt the solid body into our final form. We'll be taking a look at the surfacing techniques I use to detail portions of this model here and add visual interest to a shape that if I just created it with solid features wouldn't look that interesting. There's a lot of interesting character lines that go into creating this part, and let's take a look at those. We have this outer perimeter here in blue that shapes the outside of the part. We have this interesting character line in pink that provides some additional interest. In red, we have another line that delineates between the flat and the angled surface. And finally, we have this yellow line that acts as the perimeter of the part. So in solid sculpting, we'll be using a form of surfacing where we are subtracting from a greater whole. The very first feature in the tree that makes up this part is actually just a solid extrude. And then with the additional detailing with surface features, we get to our final developed form as seen on the right. We have identified the character line shown in SOLIDWORKS, the blue outside perimeter of the part and the yellow front perimeter of the part, with 2 additional character lines in pink and red that we'll use to help define the shape and build surface features between. So in SOLIDWORKS here, I've rolled up to the top of the tree in this model. We can see that the main shape is created from a single extrude feature, 2 draft features to angle some of the side faces, and then I have a series of layout sketches that I have named appropriately in the feature tree. They're shown here in both green and orange. I'm a huge fan of changing some of the sketch colors of your key sketches so that way they easily stand out. Otherwise you can be looking at a whole bunch of gray, which is the default color for a sketch when you're not actually editing it. So here I have a layout for this front shape. What we're going to be doing in this video is adding some visual interest and detail to the portion between this edge, or these 2 edges, and the green layout sketch. So if we were to actually take a look at this layout sketch here, I have 2 lines, some angle dimensions, and a sketched fillet that will be used to size the transition. I'm not actually going to use this fillet for the transition. What I'm going to do is go in and create a second sketch where I converted these entities, and I'm using the technique explored in earlier videos for creating a parametric G3 style spline between those 2 edges. Looking at the curvature combs, we have that nice smooth acceleration, the hallmark of a G3 connection. So what we're aiming to do here is create a surface that adds more visual interest. I could have just created a chamfer, but it doesn't have the same look as it approaches this character line in the part. So what we're actually going to be doing is creating a sketch here on a plane in between these 2 lines that instead of just having a straight line between this point and this point, we have a straight line and then we have a style spline that's used to add a little bit of kick up. This gradual transition here, this sculpting will accentuate this character line and provide a nice little highlight here that will better define the character line in the part. So we need to actually start creating the surface features, and the very first feature is going to be a boundary surface. So this boundary surface is created between a sketch on a plane that's kind of set down that it determines the height. So we have just straight lines on these faces, and then a second sketch on the top face. I'm not worried about the transition right now. We're going to be creating that later. My second sketch here is actually showing that kick up that we just looked at, and that's going to provide that nice detailing that accentuates the character line. So building the boundary surface, we now need to use it to actually sculpt the part, and we actually need to add a little bit more material to the end faces. So we're just using the surface extend command to make our surface a little bit longer to make sure that it fully pokes through the outside faces of the part. We can now cut the material away from the part using the surface cut command. The cutting body, the original boundary surface, is no longer required, so using the body delete feature, that's removed from the tree. And now we need to go about detailing this front fillet transition and the corresponding face on the top face. Hiding these layout sketches for a second, we're going in and we're creating a fillet on the front face. I have the curvature continuous profile option on because I do want that smoother connection as compared to just a normal circular fillet. If we were to examine the part from the front, you can actually see that the fillet has kind of kicked up. One of the things the fillet is doing is extending the faces, and ultimately we want to have a nice straight line between these 2 points, whereas the fillet is kicking up here. So we're going to go in and use some additional detailing tools to build a nice sculpted transition between this fillet and the layout sketch here. Now I could go in and use the split line tool, but the split line tool has some serious ramifications for parent-child later in the model, and it can cause issues if you ever have to go in and get rid of that. So I'm a huge fan of using the split command to isolate areas of the model that we want to cut out. So what I'm using is a sketch here. I've converted the original G3 layout spline and then added 2 additional lines that were made perpendicular to these lines here, and I'm cutting out a portion of the model. So now I can use the additional detailing on this part. I've generated new sets of edges, so I have 2 new bodies. I've actually cut the part into 2. I have the green body and the gray body. I now need to go in and remove the faces that we will be replacing later, which are all these. We're going to be building a nice smooth transition between here. So using delete face to remove those from the model, and I now have a surface body. We can isolate just our body we're working on. And I actually do need to use the split line tool here to remove that little bit of peaked material. This is going to give us a nice smooth edge that we can build our boundary surface between. Boundary surface here is pretty straightforward. I don't actually need to set up tangency or curvature to face relations here because the profiles in direction 1 were inherently curvature continuous to these side profiles, so it's an extra detail we don't need to add. Actually, adding too much information to SOLIDWORKS at this point can complicate the surface. So note that I don't have any end constraints on my boundary surface here. So we'll build the boundary surface. It's a matter of knitting it into the model using surface knit, and I now have a solid body that can be combined into the main mass. And now we have that nice sculpted front line. If we turn off our model edges, we can see the benefit of having that gradual kick up. It really accentuates that character line with that nice subtle highlight we see in the shaded view. So to recap what we just covered in SOLIDWORKS, we're creating layout sketches that help define the character lines in the part, and we'll be using these to create additional surfaces that we'll use to sculpt the part. As a tip, I like changing the color of these layout sketches so they're easily identifiable. We're sketching the surface profiles, and I'm using a standard sketch fill to define the size of a G3 connection that we'll be later building surfaces between. I'm building smoother connections with a G3 style spline. If you would like to know how I created this and you haven't seen our previous videos, please go check them out. In order to help emphasize the character lines, instead of just creating a straight line between 2 points, we're actually adding a little bit more visual interest by using a style spline that has a little bit of curvature to it. What this is going to do is help give us a really nice subtle highlight around that character line and further emphasize it. We're building the sculpting surface with the boundary surface tool. I have the 2 sketch profiles in direction 1, and I have that sketch that has that kicked up style spline in direction 2. We're creating the corner transition with the curvature continuous edge fillet, and then we're using split tool to create 2 new bodies where we had 1. The splitting tool is a sketch composed of 2 straight lines and our G3 style spline previously seen. We can now eliminate the kick up that was caused by the fillet. And finally, we're creating a boundary surface that completes the corner transition. We have 2 profiles in direction 1 and 2 profiles in direction 2. We're not using any end conditions because the transitions are inherently curvature continuous based on the profiles in direction 1. And the completed sculpted character line. That little subtle kick up in the style spline really helps provide that visual interest and that soft, subtle highlight that emphasizes that character line. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this installment of Zen and the Art of SOLIDWORKS Surfacing. Be sure to check out the example SOLIDWORKS files on the DiMonte Group website linked in the description below. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Happy SOLIDWORKS surfacing.